Welcome to Butterflies of Wisdom, everyone. And maybe it should be called Caterpillars of Wisdom, because if my internet connection seems to be wonky, that's because I have caterpillar backhoes outside my house and we're getting my lights fixed. So if my internet all of a sudden drops out while Caroline and I are talking, that is why. And I'm going to try to do my best with this situation. But I do have a guest with me today. Her name is Caroline, and I'm going to let Miss Caroline take it away.
Hello. Well, it is an absolute pleasure to be on this podcast with you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, you are so welcome. And please explain more to my fan base of what you do.
Well, I help people move forward in numerous ways. I think ever since I was a very, very young person, I'm now in my mid-40s, midlife crisis, at least every 5 years. And basically, ever since I was very, very young, I wanted to help people move forward, wherever they are and however they do it. And how that's manifested itself is, after working in corporate organizations for most of my for the earlier part of my career, I was very much drawn to helping individuals find their ideal roles, for companies to find their ultimate people that they needed to hire. And I ended up, I'm now 10 years as a headhunter stroke executive coach. And I've also launched a company called the Emotionally Intelligent Recruiter that is specifically helping recruiters to evolve in the artificial intelligence age. So, I've got all of these things going on. I'm a juggler, and also I've got a child that was born with a neuro condition with two enlarged choroid plexuses, which has meant that he's had neurosurgery all of his life. So, I'm a juggler of life.
You're a juggler of life, and you understand the disabled aspects because you're a caregiver, which I love. I don't know if you listen to my podcast, but yes. I have cerebral palsy. So yes. I live life to the fullest and try to balance cerebral palsy with running a podcast and with running a company and writing books. So, okay, you stepped out of corporate America. Why did you do that? Did you do that because of your son's medical needs, or did you just do that because you were sick and tired of living that office cubicle? Let's face it.
Yeah, and that is a really good question, because I could have stepped out of corporate land for any reason. And so there are two parts of that side of the career. I was in corporate land, working with Sony and various other companies for a number of years, and also working in startup. And at that time, I was very much focused on the product, so product marketing, public relations. I even had my own PR company at one stage, and even I would be focused very much on the products, like PlayStation and the games associated with them, and so on and so forth. But what I found is that it isn't about the product. Yes, I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. I love playing with toys, literal toys. I love games. I love technology and advancements. But I realized that it's no longer about working on the product and the marketing and the profit and loss, and that isn't what fueled me. What I realized was that sitting down with people, and I'd probably irritate everybody when I would do this, but I'd want to kind of get into their brains and work out what made them tick and what they really wanted to do in the future. And that's really kind of where I went. And I really had that kind of itch, and it was an unstoppable itch to go down that particular path. And what happened was, before my son was born, he's now 10, so it would have been, he's 10 and a half, so it would have been about 11 or so years ago, I I had this huge itch, when you just have to do something, and I didn't know, it hadn't manifested itself, if I can sound that way. And what happened was that when I received a phone call from a headhunter in the UK asking me specifically if I would ask my husband if I could ask him if he could find some talent for a studio in the UK. And I just turned around and said, no, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to approach these people. And this is how you need to find that fit, and so on and so forth. And that's when I had my eureka moment. And this was weeks before giving birth to my son, whom at the time I did not know that he had these challenges. Okay. So when he was born, we didn't know until he was 8 days old what was going on with him, because it wasn't until we took him to the doctor for the standard checkup, and the doctor took one look at Felix, my son, and said, oh my gosh, he has hydrocephalus. And I was like, well, hydro what? What's that? I don't know what that is. And that's when we went to the hospital and found out 2 days later that he had to basically spend his life, having a shunt and various other things. Yeah. And but even at that time, even when he was having all of that neurosurgery, my drive to take that particular path was unstoppable. Nobody could get in my way. That was the way that it was going to be. I was going to take that path. And it was quite fortuitous because I was working with a company in the UK. And at that time, I was waiting for us to kick off the PR agency all over again after coming back from maternity leave. But because I couldn't, I think there was the perception that I wasn't able to do the job 100%, which if you've got a company, you have to give it 100%. Yeah. I think they came to the realization that I wasn't able to do that function and grow that business. And we went our separate ways, which gave me the complete freedom to then take that path unbridled. And that was the path I took. And so it was a case of, it was all quite fortuitous. It was all about timings. And I think had I not been so blinkered at the time, I would have immediately just gone, oh, you know what I need to do? I need to just go back to corporate land and continue with that PR agency. But instead it was very much, nope, this is my mission. There is no other way I can do this. This is the way forward. And here we are.
If I can jump in here just to explain in detail what hydrocephalus is. And Carol, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Hydrocephalus, from my understanding, is water on the brain. Mm-hmm. And how they cure water on the brain is by putting shunts into it. And yes, you can live into adulthood with hydrocephalus. I want to make that very clear.
Yes.
That Felix is 10, I'm 30, with cerebral palsy, but yes, you can live a full and happy life with a physical disability like cerebral palsy or hydrocephalus. And that's my medical challenge for today. Getting back to your story, do you think Felix, living with Felix and obviously taking care of Felix, has changed your perspective on being a headhunter and doing what you do now?
I'm going to just take that pause because I love that question, and it's been, that kind of question has been skirting around my mind for a long time. Has that impacted everything that I have done with my business, with the business development of deciding to go and take a coach approach with the candidates, and once they're placed? I think it's a combination of both. In reality, I think I already had it in me. I was already driven in that particular way, especially early on in my career and just from my personality. But I think his situation was a tipping point, and I found and a friend of mine has a child with Williams syndrome, and she kind of introduced me around about the same time about neuroplasticity and how the brain is so plastic, and you can actually teach the brain to adapt, to grow, and to evolve. And I remember thinking at the time, that's a bit hippy dippy, but it wasn't until I actually did my certified executive coaching course and read so much more data about neuroplasticity, I then realized, that is actually the most important thing. And you can go from one extreme, which is obviously with my son, or, and anyone that has certain challenges, to help them move forward. But there's also, people that are CEOs that need that kind of support as well, to help them realize that they're able to move forward and advance, just by understanding how the brain can develop and what our habits are and how we can evolve them.
Well, neuroplasticity is one of those things that will not go away. And the brain is a remarkable organ. It can rework itself, and I'm sure your son's brain has reworked itself over the years. My brain has reworked itself over the years.
Yes.
I don't know how it has, but my brain has made me the functioning woman I am today. I don't have cerebral palsy in my brain. I have cerebral palsy in my body. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So sorry, do you mind if I ask a question? So I once hired a lovely woman, and she had CP, and I didn't know she had CP. She worked with me. She was working as a headhunter, and she was absolutely fantastic. And it was just one day she said out of the blue, "Oh yeah, I was born with cerebral palsy." And I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, that's why I've got this gait, and I've had lots of I've had a lot of work on it, and so on and so forth." And it just didn't occur to me. I had no idea that there was such a variety of that there were so many different ways that cerebral palsy could manifest itself. So one of the my husband's nephew has CP, and it was a very, very, very tragic situation where it was due to oxygen starvation when during childbirth. So he is bound to needing
A wheelchair.
And care non-stop,
A wheelchair and care non-stop. I actually have two friends. One, my assistant actually has CP, and this is public knowledge, so she doesn't care about me talking about it.
Okay.
She actually got the umbilical cord wrapped around the neck. The other friend of mine was born able-bodied, neurotypical, perfectly fine, choked on a piece of popcorn at age 2, aspirated on a piece of popcorn, spent months in a coma, and then began breathing on his own, and now has acquired CP, and he's paralyzed, and just like your husband's nephew, he needs care 24/7.
Oh,
yeah.
Hugs to you all. I mean, it's a very challenging situation, and what I really appreciate is that all of the people that I have come across that have CP live the fullest life.
We try to. We try to. But I know where your question is going, and I don't mind talking about it. I have moderate cerebral palsy. I won't call it severe because I can walk on my own. Mm-hmm. I was able to walk independently up until age 18, and then spinal fusion got in my way of walking independently. Let's just put it that way. They left me paralyzed for 20 minutes, and they also gave me propofol infusion syndrome. I'm now writing a book on scoliosis, and completely different than CP, because I'm coming to realize that scoliosis, anyone can get it.
Yes.
Able-bodied, disabled, and it happens at puberty, which the doctors don't tell you. So now I'm writing, no. And my story to tell you a little bit of my story, then
Please.
get back on to the baseline questions. My story was my curve went from 19 degrees, which isn't that bad, to it probably went from 17 degrees to 50 degrees in the time span of 1 month.
No.
Because I'm not kidding.
Oh my
When I
gosh.
say this, because at the time I was hitting puberty
And the growth.
and the growth, and they didn't tell me that. They said, oh, when I got back from the Bahamas, where my mom's family still lives, and she grew up, I went to my orthopedic surgeon down in Denver, Colorado, and I'm lucky because we have one of the third-ranked children's hospitals in the country 4 hours away from me. And I remember, I believe it was March 22nd, and I remember him saying, oh boy, this is bad, you need surgery. I remember him handing me a Kleenex, handing my mom a Kleenex, and that I don't remember the rest of the appointment. And then fast forward to June 14th of 2006, I go in for 6-hour surgery. They almost kill me / paralyze me. So I now use a walker. My legs are getting stronger, thank God. And now I'm on the process to learning how to walk again. Thank you. And so that is why I'm stepping out and doing a book on scoliosis.
Oh, I'm so glad you are. I really am. And Jack,
I have realized that scoliosis is bigger or just as big as CP, and anyone can get it. But what the doctors fail to tell you is any able-bodied person is why the curve gets so bad is because of puberty and growth of the human body.
Yes, and that makes so much sense. And in fact, my husband's nephew Jack had to have surgery for his scoliosis, and he's got 2 metal rods to straighten it. And it looks incredibly painful. But you know, his it's made a huge difference in terms of digestion and in terms of his quality of life now. And yeah, so that's a good thing. Wow.
It's actually in Jack's case and in my case, it's actually not that painful because they're buried so deep in the skin, and so it's actually not that painful. The only time, and I'll mention this in the book, is when my back really bothers me is when I have women's issues, believe it or not, and that's the only time my back really bothers me. And I still have a 10-degree curve. You just can't tell because when they do a spinal fusion on anyone, including myself, including Jack, your husband's nephew, they can't make the curve go away. They can't make the scoliosis go away completely.
Wow. Well, it's just phenomenal what you have gone through, and clearly what you have to go through. I'm so happy to hear that you're learning how to walk again. And what's your goal there? So tell me, you want to walk again. What's your goal? Is it by a certain time, or is there a certain amount that you want to be able to walk?
I would like to walk independently to my bathroom, so I don't have to necessarily use the walker to get to the bathroom. I mean, going to the bathroom, people take for granted, but Jack doesn't, I don't, and a lot of other people, and I'm sure Felix doesn't either, because he has hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain. So those little things in life that you take for granted, I would like to do without my walker. Now I'm doing it the odd way out here. I'm not getting off a walker and going to a cane. I'm just getting off a walker and walking independently.
Fantastic.
So that's my story. But getting back to your baseline questions, I want to know what your favorite book is.
My favorite book. There are so many. Oh my gracious. I think. It's hard to say which my favorite book is. I think the book that I'm reading right now is actually my favorite because I'm reading it right now. It's Eddie Izzard's book, where he talks about his life and really about because he's a very private guy, or he has been in my eyes. Eddie Izzard's a great comedian. He's very funny, and he caught everybody's eye in the 90s when he was probably the first transgender comedian, and he would call himself the transsexual comedian. He would go on stage with painted nails and heels and look absolutely fantastic. And he's fascinating. He had and he has dyslexia and learning challenges, and lost his mother at a very young age, and his father remarried, and it's just very nice to be able to read a book about someone's life that you've admired from afar, somebody that's given you pleasure and serious laughing fits on numerous occasions, and just to get some insight into his life that he finds or found amusing and cared to share.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So, and I also lost my mom at a fairly young age, and my dad's in the process of getting remarried. So, and this book you're talking about relates similarly to my life. And so, if you had to be educated by anyone, who would it be and why?
So many people out in there. The first person that came up in my mind was Marshall Goldsmith. He's a phenomenal coach. He's just one of those people that's able to simplify leadership and coaching and all of those different languages. There's from a coaching perspective, and to be able to apply them very easily in layman's terms. So you kind of go, yeah, that makes so much sense. But then the next person that came into my brain immediately was then Bill Gates, because behind the billionaire facade, he's really gone through a lot of challenges. He spearheaded the technology revolution, and with everything from Windows back in the 90s onwards. And I would just love to sit with him and talk about life and how he approaches leadership challenges, and how he is motivated with the Gates Foundation on how he wants to evolve the planet with his virtuous causes and what have you, which I find his endeavors to be quite remarkable. And then the next person that kind of sprang to mind immediately from that was somebody like Tony Robbins, because again, I think he's extraordinarily driven. I'm not crazy about his style of communications, but he has something very magical in him that really helps people make those significant changes, so they're able to get out of their kind of whatever fix they're in. He's able to inspire them, and I think we underestimate how much when people are inspired, that can actually be very powerful, and it can really help drive someone forward. And I say that because right now I need inspiration from my group of exercise people to help me get out of my non-exercise rut for the past 6 days. And so I'm just saying we all need inspiration to do something. So I should ask you, what inspired you to, or who inspires you to make sure that you're writing your book?
Oh, geez. Oh, geez. Here we go. Well, Caroline's laughing at me because she knows it's the truth. No, I wrote my first book when I was 23 years old. I wrote my first autobiography when I was 23 years old. This podcast, which I hate to tell you, it's coming to an end, you guys, March 9th. I'm actually dreaming of another podcast, which is more about cerebral palsy than this one, because you guys are so fascinated by cerebral palsy that it's time for me to let Butterfly of Wisdom fly into the sunset as of March 9th. And I was given the signs last night. I've been given the signs all this week. And then I was interviewing a woman earlier this morning who said, "Do you actually know what a podcast is?" And said this, she said this live on air. And I'm like, okay, we're done interviewing people as of March 9th. And I told my assistant and I told my co-host, and they go, "We completely understand." And and so to answer your question, Caroline, who inspires me to write my books? Well, I take my life and turn them into books, and so that's what inspires me to write my books. And I apologize for the coughing of that, but that inspires me to write my books. My crazy life inspires me to write my books, and because I didn't know how cerebral palsy was going to be accepted into the world when I wrote I Come a Win. Well, turns out it was accepted extremely well. Not only were my friends, my family, complete strangers supporting the book, they were asking me questions, and so now I want to dig deeper into cerebral palsy and do less of the interviewing, dig deeper into those challenging questions from my fans, because I want to answer those questions to the best of my abilities. So that's what inspires me to write my books, keep going, and yes, I will be keeping this podcast going until March 9th, and then I'm taking 2 weeks off to get myself organized to do Ask Win podcast, which will be a fan-based podcast, and then I will answer those questions and put them up on a podcast feed.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think it's great that you're doing that, because I just want to reflect on my experience when Felix was born and he was diagnosed with choroid plexus hyperplasia and hydrocephalus. It was back then, 11 years ago, you couldn't really find anything online, and I think if fast forward to today, if he was born, now, I would be thinking, okay, where can I get resources? And fortunately, there are so many resources now online about hydrocephalus and shunts and so on and so forth. But the world of cerebral palsy is a big one, and I think there's so much that really needs to be communicated to the people that are living with cerebral palsy, and obviously the carers that need to understand how their children are going to be evolving, what support networks there are. And I think the other crucial point is that from an employer's perspective, I've employed people with cerebral palsy, well, a person with cerebral palsy in the past, and have no qualms whatsoever. But I think there is this bias, unfortunately, but this is human nature, whereby people will think, oh, well, can they work? Of course they can.
Yeah.
Jack, for example, is as smart as anyone. He even though he can't hold the cards, he'll beat people at poker. He's got a great brain.
I love it. He'll beat people at the poker. I love it. And so, yes. And back in 87, the reason why I am inspired to do this Ask Win podcast is because back in 87, when I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and I was born, there were no internet resources for my poor mom and dad to go to, and they didn't want to go the support group route because the support group route is not very inspiring. We banged into a different drum in this helped. And back in 87, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, and the end of the 80s, 87, doctors were literally telling these parents to stick these kids in homes. They will never function, they will never talk, they will never walk, they will never be functioning citizens. And so my mom said, absolutely not. And my dad actually fired the person who said that to my mom, my grandma, and I believe my dad's sister was there too. And he gets this hysterical phone call from my mom in 87, and the next thing he gets on the phone with the head who said that, puts his child in a home. He goes, "You're fired. Don't ever work on this case again." And the doctor went gulp. And because my parents banged to a different drum, and as you proudly said about Felix, you bang to a different drum with him. I mean, you accept his disabilities, like this no tomorrow, and you want him to achieve the best quality of life. And so that's why I'm going to do this podcast, because I really feel like if you get sent down that rabbit hole of Googling what is CP or what is hydrocephalus, you'll never get out of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I like the way that you can be the voice for this and provide all of the different contexts and information and resources and comfort, if I can say the term comfort, because it's very comforting to know that there is somebody out there that is able to provide a real human aspect to it versus the doctors. Even the doctors, because they don't have CP, or it's not the same. The doctors only kind of want to fix something, so I think what you're doing and the direction that you're taking is the right one, because it's going to be serving so many people that are in need and will want that comfort.
And will want that comfort. And these questions will come from my fans and not from me, even though I'll chime in when I can. But these questions, so it's going to be a community-driven show. And for the weeks I don't have questions, I was thinking of doing interview style, but that's it. So I'm really excited about ending butterflies of wisdom and serving a greater purpose. Now, Caroline, where can people find you? And then I'll let you explain, and then you will have a couple minutes to ask me a couple questions about anything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you. So where to find me? You can go to the www.theeirecruiter.com. That's probably the best place to find me. Otherwise, there's LinkedIn if people use LinkedIn here. And you just look for Caroline Stokes, headhunter or forward or whatever. Or you can find me on Twitter at Caroline Stokes.
Yeah.
So my questions for you. I think you've already answered some of them, which is, how are you evolving what you do, and so you kind of beat me there, which is that you've already made the important decision. You've laid the line in the sand, which is that you are going to be finishing Butterflies, and you're going to be going into your new era, which is to serve the CP community in a more direct way, and that I think is quite phenomenal, and that is the journey, isn't it? We think, okay, well, we've done this, and now I'm going to be doing this because this is what I feel most strongly about. And you've already answered the question on why you're doing it, so you kind of beat me at already on those two questions. But really, I should ask you. So I hear it's with regards to that, with regards to your podcast, what is your big, hairy, audacious goal with it? You've already talked about what you think what you will do, but what is your goal for this podcast?
My goal, and my big, hairy, audacious goal, is to, with my books and with my podcast, is to get on the New York Times bestseller list with my books on the case in the UK, the Guardian bestseller list for the UK listeners out there. And my big audacious goal with Ask Win, my new CP podcast, is to answer people's questions from the heart. But I may get emotional while doing this because I wanna answer people's questions from the heart, and you guys can ask me questions from what it's like to walk with a walker to what it's like to go to the bathroom. You guys can ask me open and honest questions about what it's like, because my life is literally an open book. I mean, literally, it's an open book. And so I did not realize that my book would be spinning off into a podcast until complete strangers asked me that. So, how do you handle all this with cerebral palsy? I mean, people think cerebral palsy, and they probably think hydrocephalus too. In the same way, people with hydrocephalus and cerebral palsy don't have the brain power that the average human does, but yet we do. They think of us as a box of blocks. I'm sorry to say that, but they do. They do. And my main question from my fan base is, how do we treat the disabled? And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. Open up your eyes and look. And look. And 9 times out of 10, the disabled won't say, can you help me? But it's kind of you to ask them.
If I can just jump in there, I think the challenge is not necessarily for people that are asking that question. How am I supposed to interact with the person with disability? It's because they just have no idea about what's appropriate, and they have no idea about whether or not something is going to be upsetting to them or whatever. And it really is a case of you don't know what you don't know. And this is where with a lot of people it can be scary to go down that path. They don't know, and that is part of the problem. Whereas if there was this kind of code that a bit like with the Me Too situation, speculation that's been going around right now, which is that if there was some kind of code that could be created specifically for for people of disability that says I am human too, or whatever it might be, which is that, just talk with me.
Yeah.
Just have a conversation. Just listen. I think that is the thing, because yes, my son is different. I mean, holy smokes, he will not stop talking. And it's a case of, I will roll my eyes and go, yep. Okay, you're now completely taken over by Felix. Enjoy that. I'll see you in a few hours. But it's one of those things where people can be nervous because they don't know. They haven't had that exposure, and they don't know what's appropriate.
Exactly. And so no, I will answer you guys' questions with honesty, and I will do my research on my end, because as you guys know, I'm going back to school, and no, this is not one of the reasons why I'm ending Butterflies of Wisdom on March 9th. It's because I want to serve you guys deeper as a journalist now. So school has nothing to do with ending of this podcast. It's because I got assigned cerebral palsy, so I might as well use it as my gifts, not my challenges.
It's wonderful. And I think as a spokesperson for the community of disabled people, I think it's so important, because again, you're demonstrating through all of your actions, through wanting to learn how to walk again, so you are able to move around. You're writing books for since forever. You have a big, hairy, audacious goal, which is to get onto the New York Times bestseller list, the Guardian bestseller lists. You already have a successful podcast. You want another new podcast that serves the greater community, and boy, is that community huge, because there are carers, there's caring associations, there's hospital people. There's people in the hospitals that work with people of disabilities everywhere, and they don't even have the resources. So I think as a spokesperson for not only cerebral palsy, but for any person with a neuro condition, or anyone with that has a challenge or difficulty with moving around, you're able to change the narrative. The narrative has changed a lot since the 80s, as you indicated earlier, but even more so.
Yes, the narrative has changed a lot since the 80s, but it's even more so, and I don't want to be sending those people down rabbit holes of figuring out what on brain hydrocephalus or cerebral palsy, because once you get down those rabbit holes, oh boy, there's no turning back. There's support groups online, there's everything else, and I think that the podcasting is the best way to do it. So you guys, I appreciate you guys listening to Caroline and I speak about not only her company, but her personal journey. Of course, she didn't tell me any of this before the podcast interview. Here I thought we were only going to be speaking about her personal journey, and her company, but I didn't realize that she had a close connection with cerebral palsy and hydrocephalus. I did not realize that. So learn something every day, and I hope you guys enjoyed another fabulous episode. This podcast will be out today, so you guys can hear my announcement. And I hope that when Butterflies of Wisdom is off into the sunset, I hope that you guys fully support Ask Win, because Ask Win will be a more community driven show, and Ask Win will just be as wonderful as Butterflies of Wisdom is/was, and you never know what Ask Win will bring. It may be a full-on book, I don't know, but I want to try something new to serve you guys even better. But for now, I hope you guys enjoyed another fabulous episode, and I'll be back with another fabulous interview. And Caroline, what are your closing thoughts for this interview?
Well, my closing thoughts are thank you for your time. I really enjoyed sitting here with the microphone, with you in my ears, very much getting into your world, and just having this frank conversation with you about your big, hairy, audacious goals and dreams, and the way that you're moving everything forward. I'm very excited about that, and it was just a pleasure to be on here sitting with you and having a conversation. So
well, thank you. Thank you very much for saying that. And you guys can tweet me at Win Kelly, Kelly, Charles, and of course the @ symbol behind all that. And that information will be in the show notes. This podcast is sponsored by Grace by Grit. Grace by Grit is a clothing line in California. They're giving you 20% off when you type in the code EXO Butterflies. And thanks to you guys for putting up with me. And I hope you join me on the next adventure. As of March 9th, Butterflies of Wisdom isn't setting off quite yet, but it will be, and so I just wanted to place you guys for impact. But I thank you guys for joining me on this incredible episode. Thanks to you guys.